Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I am playing as the Empire against the Empire in a mirror matchup. And the other Empire led by Morbid ZG on the map Lost Idols. So I'm running a bit of a cheesy strategy here. I did want to give it a try. I had the idea to run an army initially of all of 3 Amber Wizards on Gryphons, as well as a Lord on a Griffin, but then I decided that I'm probably going to need a Lore of Life just for the healing, so I decided to bring a Jade Wizard on a Pegasus instead. So what I ended up with is I brought, since I did have Lore of Life and it was going to be focused on the hero blob, I decided to bring Karl Franz, because he is a very solid melee combatant. He does a lot of damage, and he does have some pretty powerful abilities. Reichland Runefang got reworked recently. It used to be a another flat damage buff, and you have to do some splash bonus. But it got changed so that all allies nearby do plus 34 melee attack and plus 8 leadership. And Galmaraz, still its same old self, doing plus 36% hero damage or armor piercing damage. And of course, come in with Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, and Deadly Onslaught. My Amber Wizards actually came in stripped down almost completely. This one over here did come in with Weston's Wild Form and Arcane Conduit. The other one coming in with his trait, the Wild Heart, as well as Arcane Conduit, and no spells at all. So I'm literally just bringing these guys for their combat purpose. These guys don't have a lot of armor, but they do have armor piercing. They do cause terror. They do actually have a -4 leadership debuff on them, the Blood Roar. And I do believe this is simply a thing from the Gryphons. And then we do have a Jade Wizard with Lore of Life, coming in, of course, with Blood Below, Earth Blood, and Life Bloom, as well as Arcane Conduit. And just look at how amazing these Gryphons for the Lore of Beasts for the Amber Wizards look awesome. I really love the look. It looks a lot, in my opinion, it looks a lot nicer than the ones of the Generals and the other lores get. Even like Karl Franz's Deathclaw over here, it does have those tiger stripes, but honestly I think the Amber Wizards definitely take the cake for prettiest looking Griffin. So the rest of my line is composed of unbreakable units, because they're just there to kind of hold. I do have 2 units of Flagellants interspersed with the Tattersouls and the Sigmar Sons. Sigmar Sons should do very well against most Empire units. They have a very high melee defense, definitely much higher than Flagellants, and even with the Flagellants are losing a battle and their trait kicks in, the Strength of the Penitent, even with that kicked in, the Sigmar Sons are much better at just holding their ground. They're a very, very strong unit. And then my other 2 units are Royal Altdorf Gryphites and the Demi-Gryph Knights. So this is a very, very terror-heavy build. Demi-Gryph Knights with Halberds are there to shut down enemy large, because my biggest worry was that I would get surrounded by a bunch of large units. I'm fairly confident about my ability to split up around and to avoid nets of Amentok from my opponent. So fairly confident in my ability to do that, so my biggest concern really was to prevent enemy large units like, say, the Royal Altdorf Gryphites from shutting down my units. So going into full speed here, because the match does take a little while to develop. On the right flank over here, my opponent is being led by Boris Todbringer. Boris is coming in with Crush the Weak. Surprisingly, he is bringing Hold Your Ground. Midland Runefang, of course, Foe Seeker, Furious are Deadly Onslaught, and of course Stand Your Ground. So just standard loadout on a Griffin. But as long as he stays above his range contention, he's pretty safe. There's not too much I can do. Interestingly enough, my opponent did decide to bring several lores of wizardry, which definitely got me a little by surprise. He did come in with a Celestial Wizard, a Wizard of Light, and a Jade Wizard. And so the Jade Wizard coming in with the generic, they're all on foot. Jade Wizard coming in with the generic Dwellers Below and Earth Blood and Life Bloom, just like my own guys. Interestingly enough, the Celestial Wizard actually will get some use out here out of Roiling Skies, which is their penalty to melee defense and missile parry. And he's coming in with Curse of the Midnight Wind, which is a significant debuff to melee attack and armor. Though the armor won't really matter to my Flagellants, it could affect my Demigryphs or my Lords. Finally, the Light Wizard, of course, coming in with Net of Amentok, and Arcane. All of these guys do have, of course, Arcane Conduit. So the Light Wizard will be definitely a big threat, especially when combined with my opponent's other units. I'm using my Jade Wizard over here just to kind of scout, because he's a little quicker, so I figure I can get him out of dodge a little bit more easily than I can the Gryphons. My opponent's front line is all Flagellants, and as far as I can tell, they are all vanilla Flagellants, nothing fancy. And behind that, he does have 2 units of Great Swords, probably to shut down any heavily armored units I brought. Then a unit of Reichsguard, very solid, and they will actually do quite a bit of damage to my Flagellants, for example, or my whole infantry contingent, really. And then the Royal Altdorf Gryphites just to counter any of my large. Finally, he does have slightly veteraned up handgunners and the silver bullets, who I did not see at this time, but I was suspecting something sneaky. After all, the Royal Gryphons were actually cloaked within the woods, so I was definitely suspecting at least some units with stock kind of hiding around somewhere. So at the moment, I'm basically posturing. I'm pushing on my infantry line, waiting for them to push up so I can use them to apply pressure before really committing my air force. I don't want to push my Royal Gryphons too close because I do see the handgunners kind of posturing, so I don't want them getting caught by the light wizard with the net of Mintok, and then my opponent getting an easy charge with the Gryphons and handgun fire, and I really don't want to risk that. So here I'm pushing my suicide squad essentially into the fray. They're going to take a meaty hit here from the Reichsguard, who pushes through their own infantry to just plow into them. Not even the Tatterschultz will do well against Reichsguard. They've already picked off about 10 models here. Simply put, flagellants are terrible against heavily armored, heavily armored cavalry like the Reichsguard, and so of course they're just devastating these guys. However, my Lord of Life wizard is right here, and I'm already popping bullets below, and these are absolutely annihilating these Reichsguard. As you can see, I have split up my amber wizards so that one of them is going after the silver bullets, another is flying to my opponent's backline, and so while Karl Franz is netted here, he's not really going to do very much. The Reichsguard gets wiped out the man. These flagellants get almost wiped out the man, though I do lose my flagellants and the Tatterschultz in the process. I think that is very much a worthwhile trade. On the left flank over here, my opponent does use Curse of the Midnight Wind to maximize his usage of the Royal Gryphons, but unfortunately it's not really enough. I still did get that pretty hefty charge bonus from just charging into him, and I do have him outnumbered 2-1. So we'll chew through these guys fairly quickly. Unfortunately, over here on the right, Boris has landed to protect his wizard contingent, and this Amber Wizard is absolutely getting annihilated, and he's really being forced to rout. I'm not actually sure if he's unbreakable. He's routing off, but he's not really routing all that quickly, which is a little interesting. It does look like they have some missile resistance as well, though that might just be Karl Franz. Over here you can see him, I have dove in though, popped all my abilities, and Boris is going down like a 9-pin. Even with standing your ground, he absolutely stands no chance against all these units buffed by the Reichland Runefang, especially, of course, Karl Franz and the Amber Wizard. These guys have immense melee attack, and they just annihilate Boris in a few seconds. Unfortunately, being very large units, these guys are kind of knocking these wizards about, and what I'm doing here is using my rollout of Gryphons to try to shut down my opponent's range contingent. Fortunately, up here, as the fight kind of deteriorated, and after I wiped out those Reichsguard, my flagellants and the Sigmar Sons are holding their own against the enemy flagellants. They won't do good against the Greatswords, but that's okay. I'm going to be relying on my Altar of Gryphons and Boris and company, Franz and company to deal with them. Now the Greatswords are starting to become a bit of a threat to my Amber Wizard, and because these guys do have pretty low armor, Greatswords are actually a bit of a threat to both Karl and the Amber Wizards. The Amber Wizards don't have the greatest of HP, actually. And this one's practically rippled. So my opponent definitely does have the opportunity here, or the potential here, to do some damage with these Greatswords if I allow him to get caught. Now the Light Wizard over here is getting kind of mobbed by the Royal Gryphons and the normal Emigriffs, but I realized I'm taking fire from these silver bullets, so I decided to change target, change tact, and go after them, because I do see them as a bit of a priority target over the Light Wizard at the moment. Over here, my flagellants and the Sigmar Sons are still slugging it out with enemy flagellants and the Greatswords. Unfortunately, they do get hit by another Curse of the Midnight Wind, which is debuffing them. And these handguns are shortly going to open up on my units, I do believe. I'm definitely in a pretty solid position, though, as far as my my Winds of Magic go. So here you can see I'm capable of casting an Earthblood, because I do have these 3 Amber Wizards who are just, or the 2 Amber Wizards and the Earthblood Wizard, or the Earthblood Wizard. Wow. It's like he's an Earthblood bot, so that's all he does. But the Jade Wizards, who all have Arcane Conduit. My opponent does drop a net here, and I definitely mess up because I had my units clumped. I should have held back the unit was being cast on and thrown and pulled the other units away, but Franz and this beat up Amber Wizard get caught. Fortunately though, the Jade Wizard, being that just a little bit quicker, gets into these handgunners and he will tie them down. He's not a great melee combatant, I'm not expecting to do very much, but he will tie them down. Fortunately, my Demigryphs over here are being kind of, or distracted, or I'm distracted, so I'm not really microing them away, and that's definitely been a mistake. So these guys are just kind of sitting around, doing very little. Beating up on some of these remaining silver bullets over here, who have actually shattered at this point. So now I'm trying to force path past these Greatswords. Definitely a bit of a mistake. I should have pushed away and then cycled around them. But I'm just trying to get on top of these wizards. Over here, my Jade Wizard is just staying on top of these handgunners. I did cast another Dwellers Below over here, and that just annihilated the second unit of Greatswords. And now I'm kind of just using my Goon Squad of Heroes to focus down my opponent's remaining casters. And unfortunately, it's going to take a while because all of these guys are mounted in very large mounts. Or on very high mass mounts, and so they're kind of, even though when they hit, they do a lot of damage. They're definitely throwing these guys around quite a bit, and that's a bit unfortunate. But my opponent's army does shatter at this point, and that's the game. This was a bit of a cheese strat. I don't think there's any way I can argue against that. I did want to try it out, and it was actually kind of fun to try Karl Franz out. I hadn't actually realized that, even though I had read the patch notes and all that, I hadn't actually noticed the fact that the Reichland Runefang had been reworked. I actually really like the change. It definitely makes sort of gooning around with Karl Franz much more viable. And actually, to be fair, if you decide to mount him on a horse, for example, and want to back up a bunch of Demi-Gryph Knights with him, or something like that, it makes him a very strong support lord. The fact that he still does have access to that stand your ground, just like generic Empire Lords or all the generic Boris, for example, but at the same time, he does have that special bonus to melee attack. It's just huge. And you can see how fast Boris went down. Boris basically went from full HP to nothing in the space of a handful of seconds when the Ember Wizards and Karl Franz dove on him. As you can see, the Sigmar Sons performed very well. The Flagellants did okay. A lot of the kills actually came in from the Jade Wizard, and that's kind of masked in here. I actually lost the vast majority of my army, though, but all of these units were expendable, essentially, so the only units that were left around were, of course, the 16 Demi-Gryphs, I suppose, and my 4 heroes. But my opponent still had a healthy unit of greatswords, but the rest of the army was practically routed off or destroyed. I did manage to catch those Royal Gryphites out fairly quickly, and I landed some very solid Dwellers Below, whereas my opponent just didn't really have the targets for Dwellers Below. If he decided to cast it on my infantry blob was so cheap and expendable that it just couldn't work. And I don't think he actually had him ready when my Demi-Gryph Knights were engaged on his own Royal Gryphites, because he just overcasted a net on Karl Franz, so he probably didn't have the Winds of Magic to do so. If that had happened, it could have definitely turned out quite a bit differently, because if I had lost the 2 Demi-Gryph Knights, that would have been a big problem for me. Because they definitely did very valuable work shutting down the stuff my Wizards and my Goon Squad kind of couldn't do. So definitely a good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys found this match entertaining. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, questions about Quick Match, or what to run, or if you have any recommendations for comps you'd like to see done, or units you'd like to see demonstrated, be sure to post those down in the comments. I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and bye for now.